the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host Paul Spain, and today we have Brett Roberts joining again. Good to see you, Brett.
It's good to see you again. Thank you for having me.
Now, maybe you can remind listeners where you fit into this big wide world of tech these days.
So I'm a business innovation advisor at Callaghan Innovation. I've been in the tech world in New Zealand for decades, a number of decades. And just prior to this role, I was the community director for the Kiwi SaaS initiative. So I was on secondment there. I've just stepped back into my job at Callaghan the last couple of weeks.
Oh, fantastic. That's good. Big thank you, of course, to our show partners, to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology for their support of the New Zealand Tech Podcast and, of course, the broader tech and innovation ecosystems here in New Zealand. Well, a fair bit to cover off today, so let's jump in. First up, we've got the election results. It was interesting, sort of, watching through the whole election process, and we, I guess, are in a situation now where sort of social media and elections is old hat. But we've seen varying things go on overseas in terms of election sort of manipulation and so on. I'm not sure these things maybe matter so much on a global stage for New Zealand to get too much interference. We do see on the varying platform bots and bits and pieces, but it seemed as though really all the parties had put a fair bit of time and effort into their social media in different ways. Certainly, some candidates were a lot more down that track than others, and there was a bit of coverage around what National invested and did in the media, sort of post election, and really suggesting that they had I guess a lot more engagement than the other players. Other sorts of things that sort of caught my attention was just how TV now we're getting this sort of more augmented reality type sort of sets and it all looking very cool and fancy with some of the coverage, but didn't really see a huge amount that was exciting in terms of election promises and things as far as the tech sector. Any thoughts from your end, Brett?
I spent more time watching Netflix than I did the election on Saturday night.
You're a smart man.
I know, actually, it was a good call. Speaking as a government employee, right? So I have to be careful what I say. But I struggled to find a lot of inspiration in the campaigning phase. There seemed to be a lot of there's always negativity. Most of it to me seemed to be quite negative. I didn't really see a lot of stuff that kind of inspired me for the future. The way I've got 3 kids all in their 20s, and I was thinking, for me, I'm voting for their future, right? And that was there was no clear cut, obvious kind of pathway for that, right? So I think the lack of inspiration I thought was a bit disappointing. And anyone that knows me well, particularly anyone that knows me and has talked to me over a wine or 3, I often bang on around New Zealand really lacking vision, and I stand by that. I don't think anyone, probably since Norm Kirk, to be perfectly honest, has ever really had a vision for what New Zealand might be, and it's pretty hard as someone that spends a lot of time and has spent a lot of time over the years working with companies around strategy and mission and what they're trying to do and why and all that sort of thing. It's pretty hard to run a business without everyone in the organisation knowing why they're there and what they're supposed to do. What the future looks like to stick a bit of hope to and that sort of thing. So I think I struggled with that. The tech was pretty impressive. It's interesting. I think we crossed a threshold over the last 3 years of government where, with the last election, I spent a lot of time on Twitter seeing what was being said. And now Twitter's just a dumpster fire, right, or X, whatever the heck it is. And I really spent hardly any time looking at the stuff that was on there. There was some good stuff in there, but it's a lot harder now to sort the wheat from the chaff, which I thought was interesting. So I think X/Twitter, Twitter has turned something of a corner there.
Yeah, I've seen a few people. Definitely a few people sort of saying that, and then other people are like, "Oh, I bet you it's got better." So
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure.
It's a train wreck.
how much it relates to who you follow, what view you're taking, and so on. I think probably to a big degree, the majority of people end up sort of taking the default view, because you can limit it to just to your to your followers, and all these things sort of play out and impact. And of course, there's a whole lot more competition trying to compete and take users away.
No, it was interesting. I think from a tech perspective, just and I see Meta, all the folks that were serving up content. I think you have to spend as much time. In fact, we've gone from spending our time finding the information through to that's easy now. It's just drinking from the fire hose. The time and effort now goes into vetting it for veracity and bias and all the other bits and pieces. And So it was interesting as elections get. I thought it was one of the more boring, certainly one of the more predictable elections. But again, for me, that lack of spark, hope, aspiration, what might be, I thought was a key component that was missing.
We chatted a little bit last week around some of the platforms for enabling individuals to engage more in the parliamentary and democratic processes and so on. And I'm really curious to see what will evolve over the next few years ahead, and how democracy evolves, because I think there's certainly some fairly strong feelings around challenges with democracy in its current form. That said, I haven't seen any great solutions, and we've kind of got this interest in this push to maybe longer election cycles, and so. Yeah, do you open up more in the way of referendums and ways of people to be able to sort of feed back into the governmental sort of processes and considerations as new legislation is coming and going.
It's interesting. I mean, this is something I've done a lot of thinking about and I've done a lot of talking about, and it's a challenge, right? I think democracy is more tenuous or more endangered now than it's ever been for a very, very long time, around the world. I think it's very easy to draw a line between that and platforms such as Meta, with Cambridge Analytica scandal and what happened with Brexit, which was just another train wreck, and a well-engineered train wreck. You look what happened with Trump being elected in the States. So I think democracy is in danger. I run hot and cold on the idea of running things by referendums. That's making the assumption that everyone has half a clue about what they're talking about, thinking about, or voting for, and that they aren't super influenced by the last thing they saw on the last social media platform that they were on. So I don't know what the answer is. There's a lot of questions, and I think it's something we should be rightfully worried about. When you see some of the stories coming out literally 24, 48 hours after the election about the PR comms company that was behind national social media stuff, also the folks that were working for the Tories in the UK. I'm not sure I'm 1,000,000% enthused about that.
You should look up our guest that we had last week.
Oh, is that right? Okay. And US billionaires gifting free aircraft for use by some folks fly around the country. Some of that stuff worries me. There's always nobody loans aircraft to people just because they think they're nice folks, right? There's always a give for the get or a get for the give. So I think around the world, I think governments are thinking about how do you maintain that tricky balance in between. You can't lock these things down or out, but by the same measure, if you give them free rein, and I think Brexit's an excellent example of that, where no one really knew what was going on. A whole bunch of very, very smart people behind the scenes knew exactly what was going on, and look how that turned out. Now when they survey in the UK, most people would like to go back to where they were before they got shafted with Brexit. So we need to do something. I don't know what it is. I think we should all be fearful, and I think it's one of those things that across the House, I think it's a bipartisan, tripartisan, whatever comes after that partisan thing that all of the parties have to work on around how we shore up our democracy and make sure that it stays one.
And I would lay a lot of the issues that we have with democracy around the role that technology's played, the sides where we haven't really managed to tame technology appropriately. And I think one of the biggest things is that we're so used to getting things in very, very small bite-sized chunks, and often there isn't the clarity behind the scenes, behind the headlines. And I saw someone commenting on social media over the weekend around the voice vote in Australia, and was saying that Australians should hang their head in shame. But on the flip side, I don't think there was actual clarity as to exactly what people were voting for, what the long-term implications would be.
Yeah.
And so, a little bit like Brexit, there's, something's put out, it's a concept, that seems good or that seems bad, but actually understanding what what that actually means for everyone.
It's a challenge, right?
If that isn't in place, then it makes it very sort of hit or miss for people, and to a degree that's the nature of democracy, that you choose a particular direction, and then you have to sit back and trust and wait and hope things kind of go in a particular way. But of course there is that opportunity to provide more information up front, and technology should help that rather than hinder it. But then we usually go back to those small little, headlines and social media bits and pieces and the like, rather than delving into the full picture.
Yeah, look, I mean, the theory is that technology should be able to help so much, but the practicality is that I think it's actually done the opposite in so many ways. And really where we're moving to is, and I think here in New Zealand, I don't think it's unfair to say that we're heading in a similar direction. It certainly is the United States, definitely the UK, where money talks, and reach is important, right? So the media companies have an incredible sway, and they always have, but I think even more so now. Media companies, including the likes of X, etc. And also, you look at what happened in the United States with Citizens United, which was the piece of legislation that Bill Clinton signed in, which basically gave corporations carte blanche to donate money to politicians, and didn't that work out well? And I think at some point, I can't help but feel we're going to need to do something that shuts all of that out. And absolutely business should have a voice, as should the smallest of minorities. But if we're moving towards a world where the more money you have, the more sway, voice you have, and reach you have, I think that's a really slippery slope, and it's a pretty hard one to crawl back up. Right? Look at the US; it's a basket case now.
We've got to find ways to balance that, and it did seem as though we were heading in a direction there where these things were being reined in. I haven't kind of delved into all the realities of how it played out, in this election. The last week we've seen Sam Bankman-Fried trial.
Good.
FTX, all sorts of craziness going on there. But the bit that sort of stood out to me through the things that I've been monitoring on that over a period other than just this week, has been the amount of money that he has slipped in different directions.
He's
using
a criminal.
All sorts of dodgy
absolutely
memes.
He's going to spend so much time in jail. Good riddance.
I'd be surprised if he sees the light of day.
And his family. I mean, the whole thing was just dodgy from the get-go, and it's just incredible how much you can get away with when you. He's clearly an incredibly smart guy, right? Without a doubt, and some very smart people around him. But you wrap, pardon my French, a layer of bullshit around something. And sell it to folks who don't understand, and he figured out how to do that, and he did an incredible job of it. And then when you start to see the way they were shuffling literally billions of dollars around to things, and without any sort of governance at all, they weren't sure where the money was, and it was just absolutely unbelievable, but entirely predictable.
Should have been a politician. Maybe.
Yeah, that's right.
Shock! I shouldn't joke
story.
like that, but
I'm sure there's probably someone in the Tory party in the UK on the phone to him. It's like, I think Boris is gone, and would you consider you can work from behind bars?
No, I think the good thing around our elected officials is, usually they're there with a good intent. Yes, they come in with different sort of viewpoints and approaches to how they might make the country better. But and I would say, especially in a country like New Zealand, we don't tend to have a lot of corruption, and hopefully we can stay on the right side of that.
We're a very non-corrupt country, right? And that all the measures show that. And people throw the word around, but the reality is we're not a particularly corrupt country. I have, over the last 6 or 8 years, or even in my time at Microsoft, so let's say over the last 20 years, had the privilege of meeting a lot of people in political circles and a lot of people in the public sector, and I can honestly say, hand on heart, with one glaring exception, every single one of them that I've met gets out of bed in the morning to do the right thing. People of different political persuasions to mine, and my political persuasion's changed over time. People have got different viewpoints around different things. I've had some pretty good, robust conversations with folks in the public sector around how to do things or how not to do things. But all of them are trying to do their best work in systems that are just so big and complex and often archaic and lumbering. That's systemically. So literally, out of all the folks I've met, and it would be hundreds and hundreds of them, there's one that I would call out as just being a deliberate. He does the exact opposite. No names, but and a politician. But everyone else, man, everyone's trying to do the right thing, but systemically there's so much holding them back, right? It's hard trying to push it uphill with a fork.
Lots more we could delve into on that. We'll save that for another time. Probably the last little bit I would like to see is probably just there being better engagement between government and the broader population on an ongoing basis. And I think there are opportunities to
the intent's definitely
to improve there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned very briefly last week, the situation with Israel and Hamas. We're now seeing, as tends to happen, after any sort of unrest, but with the terrorist activities that have taken place, and now the war that's kicked off, the warnings around cyber incidents and this sort of stirring things up, and I think we generally need to be wise from a cybersecurity perspective, always, and recognise that look, there could be new things on that front from a cyber security perspective.
I mean, this is a pretty common standard cycle now, right? Whenever there's any large amounts of friction or something happening somewhere in the world, the whole thing steps up. And it was interesting. I happened to, just before I jumped on the Uber to come here, I saw a story on Slashdot where the US government apparently is trying to rally support from other governments around the world to stop paying cyber criminals ransoms, which I think is quite interesting, right? I mean, it's just a money generating scheme at the bottom of it. It's all chasing dollars.
Yep.
And I think it's been interesting watching over the last few years the likes of particularly the US government, but some of the others as well, and some of the larger vendors, and particularly Microsoft, doing an amazing job of shutting some of these things down.
Yeah.
So I think the pressure will just come on more and more. But, it's one of those whack-a-mole things. You whack the hammer here and something else pops up over here.
Yep.
If nothing else, with the cyber criminals, you do have to admire their ingenuity and innovation, right? They're pretty good at it.
They don't stop. They keep at it. And look, they only need to get it.
Correct.
Get it right.
Defender's dilemma, right?
Once in a blue moon, and it works out for them. So, I guess we want to be on the lookout for what those new scenarios might be, and I think there's probably all manner of potential scenarios. So
what I want to know is who's behind those calls that you get from Pakistan where you go hello and there's no one there and they hang up. So are they recording my voice? Are they going to clone my voice? Or do I have a friend in Pakistan I don't know about? And I don't know if you get them. I get quite a few of them. Pakistan, a number of countries I really don't know any people in.
Yeah.
Phone goes, pick it up, answer, hello. And so I don't answer now. I just wait and then they hang up.
Yeah, I've been hearing more and more about that. I haven't been getting them myself.
I'll forward them to you.
Is there a particular, are you seeing a particular pattern to them? I've been hearing about people getting things at a particular time of day.
Yeah. So time of day, sometimes in the evening. I've had a few of them overnight, like 2, 3 in the morning. And I don't know, over the last 12 months, probably had 20 or 30 of them.
Wow.
Easy.
Okay.
And they're all the same. You pick the phone up. As I said, I've learned to not say a word now, but, and 1 second, 2 seconds after you speak, they just hang up. So,
there's been a bit of coverage around police using new AI, using a new AI tool, SearchX, to help police get a bit of a feel for offenders' networks and connections and varying other things. I have some concerns around how we use technology when it comes to government and policing, where there's this sort of level of surveillance, and I don't know how you work out what are the right lines to draw. But you walk out on the I wandered out to grab some lunch earlier, and the number of cameras sort of sitting around, the ability to connect up the dots, very, very helpful, from a crime fighting perspective. But how far do we go before everyone's kind of a suspect, and how do you create a world that feels free, and where you're not being measured with some sort of a number floating above your head, Brett, as we've seen in TV programs, right? There's got to be some balance to this.
So many trade-offs,
and
right?
I think we need more discussion on it. There's energy that needs to go into building legislation, so there's clarity and guardrails for police, for varying entities. Of course, yes, we've got some privacy legislation in New Zealand that's reasonably modern, but I'm not sure we've fully got our head around this one, and I'm not sure we have the will to be fair, but we can't just ignore it either.
No, so you've got to have the guardrails, right? I mean, that RNZ article is well worth a read because it's got a ton of links to all sorts of other stories, and it's a really well put together article. But this all kicked off with Clearview AI. I can't remember 3, 4, 5 years ago. Which is an inherently evil company, doing amazing stuff for law enforcement agencies, but compromising privacy, in the process of doing so. And Peter Thiel's invested in it, so obviously it's evil. And the New Zealand police were toying around with that without any guardrails, right? In fact, even the police commissioner wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing worries me, and I'd like to think that since then, a lot of things have been done internally within Police HQ to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen again. And I think, we've got a very good world-class privacy commission here. That, I'm assuming now, because they weren't with the Clearview AI example, looped into all of these conversations. That should be literally a red phone on someone's desk that they pick up and talk to those folks. The challenge is that, and again, another whack-a-mole situation, once you sort of sort something out and work out the guardrails for it, some other new technology comes along, and the challenge now is with machine vision and so many devices, cameras to gather imagery. The next thing obviously is it's not going to be that hard to bolt on a lip reading thing into digital camera tech. If you can recognise a number plate, that once upon a time was horribly expensive computing stuff had to be done in the cloud, and now it's done in the camera. So we're going to be playing whack-a-mole with all of these things forever. And I think that the challenge, as always, is the technology races ahead at a speed far greater than that which legislation can keep up with it, right? It's hard to figure out legislation. It's a complex field. There's all sorts of, legality things in it that make it slow to figure out. And, making legislation is hard. And, all it takes is one bad actor in the tech world to release something. And all of a sudden, all that legislation you just spent years pondering over, now you need to do it again for something else because someone's figured out some new thing to do. So I think the guide rails are important. I think bringing agencies together is important. And this will be perennial. This will just run forever. This isn't ever going to go away. We're never going to solve it. We've got to figure out ways of not letting it run unchecked, I think is the challenge.
Yeah, and I think there's an opportunity for applying a sort of more, continuous improvement approach to legislation. But even that, I think about it and I say it, and then in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, but how could that get abused and used in the wrong direction? We look back on the Grace Millane situation, incredibly sad scenario. But I remember when it did hit the media, all the footage and so on that they joined up made it very easy for them to actually get, what I think most would argue, was the right outcome when it came to trial.
Yeah.
But there's a flip side to this whole thing, and I'm not sure if we've if we're in the right place at the moment. So
there was an interesting case in the US, I think it was last year, where a woman who works for a law firm was taking her daughter to an event at Radio City Music Hall, and the law firm was involved in a lawsuit against the owners of Radio City Music Hall. And this woman, I don't know if she was a lawyer, but she worked for a law firm, her image was picked up by a closed-circuit TV camera. They used facial recognition. They knew who she was, they knew who she worked for, and they barred her and her daughter entry to the venue. Now, of course, any venue reserves and holds the right to bar anyone that they want for any reason from their venue, right? So everything they did was perfectly legal. But what an interesting situation, right? Do you want to have everyone's face? Do you want your face to be scanned at all things? And you might say, I don't know, something about an organisation one day and they happen to be the sponsor of an arena somewhere, and all of a sudden you don't get let into a concert. Right? So these are the challenges. There's almost these high-level kind of ethical dilemmas that we have to work our way through. It's that classic thing in tech. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's almost the guiding principle of tech, certainly for the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks of this world. And I think those are some of the things we've got to grapple with. And, of course, the other challenge is the number of folks currently thinking about this across 5 million people in New Zealand is 20 or 50 or 100 or 1,000. It's a tiny, tiny percentage of the population. Most people don't know this stuff's happening, don't understand how it impacts their lives, right?
Yeah. And the ability for us to apply resources in New Zealand versus what happens
correct. It just comes from offshore.
In other markets. And,
exactly right.
Do you just sign up to what, someone overseas is doing? Well, no, not necessarily either, right? So not so easy. Now we see with what's been happening in Israel and so on, that there's been social media drama alongside it, as is always the case. Pushbacks from I saw that probably the initial coverage was the EU was warning TikTok to rein in some of the content, but we were seeing this really across probably all social networks where we're getting pushes. I think particularly from it was EU that moved very, very quickly, but the challenge with social media is it's like trying to challenge the discussions that take place in a bar or people over lunch and any other sort of scenario. There's going to be all manner of opinions and things shared. And, some of it's going to be complete and utter rubbish. Some of it's going to be very manipulative and is designed to draw people down a particular track. Other is just sort of, straight up, facts and figures. But, usually like a typical chit chats on controversial subjects, it's not going to be particularly close to being 100% accurate.
No, I mean, look, it's that. I'm going to use the word perennial twice in a podcast. Problem of the balance between free speech and that you're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theatre thing, right? And it's I've seen tons of stuff, particularly on X/Twitter over the last few days since all that terrible stuff kicked off in Gaza. That I'm initially horrified by and revolted by, and then within hours it turns out actually it was factually incorrect. It got tweeted around the world by thousands of people, and it actually wasn't true. And so I said earlier, and I'm placing less and less credence in a lot of those sources now. Once upon a time, Twitter was fantastic for that news feed, for being right at the sharp, pointy end, getting stuff early. It was, TVNZ and most of New Zealand's print media would be out of business if it wasn't for Twitter and Reddit, right? They will,
that's where they get the news from, latest from, right?
That's right.
And
whereas now there's just so much deliberate misinformation or accidentally amplified deliberate misinformation, and I think the value of those platforms is just going backwards. I see less value in them personally, and I've been on Twitter for literally the year it started, I think. I used to live on it. It was fantastic. And now it's like, I'm on Blue Sky. Blue Sky feels like Twitter did. Less idiots. But, it's interesting that a lot of things get better over time, and these things I think are actually getting worse.
As you get more people and more spam and,
more manipulation, more money getting thrown at them, more bad actors, less, look what Elon Musk has trashed X, right? And for whatever purpose, I'm not sure. Maybe he's just not very smart. But what a shame. Something that was an incredible asset, genuine asset, global asset, it's just turned into this, I think, dumpster fires.
Well, I'll push back a little bit on that because I think the community notes capability that allows, and I haven't sort of delved into, exactly how it sort of operates behind the scenes, but I guess it's a little bit kind of Wikipedia-like in that there's some stuff that allows you to bring clarity to a controversial situation, which maybe on other platforms we haven't got that sort of level. Now, of course, the community notes, which you see something that's BS, basically allows people to say, hey, this isn't true, or it's not quite factually true. Here's the balance to give you the full picture, or actually that photo's not what you think it is. It was taken 15 years ago, and now it's being said that it's XYZ happening, and so on. I think that's a really standout capability. So I think it's a great feature, and they're even applying it to adverts, which I thought like that is really good because. To one degree, you would think, well, adverts just need to be purely factually correct and sound and solid. But, I often see ads and there's a little community note under it going, this ad is for XYZ game. But
that's the classic, right? But the gameplay doesn't look anything like this. Don't be sucked in. It's a bait and switch. So I would agree and disagree, right? So I think that is a good feature. But literally the owner of the platform tweets right-wing memes that people put community notes underneath. It doesn't stop anything. It's just if you want to read a bit more, there's a bit more context. And I'm not sure that's addressing the problem. It's just tagging another little note on the end of the problem. And they fired all of their online safety folks, right? They got rid of the entire team. I feel incredibly sorry for their CEO. What a horrible job that would be right now. I don't know. My personal the way I've experienced X/Twitter is that over the last, and definitely since Musk bought it with Saudi money, it's gone downhill. It's of less use to me than it used to be. The information is less accurate, less dependable. There are more, and I curate my feed very, very carefully.
Yeah.
There's more randos in there jumping into that because Musk took away some features that kept those people out. Blocking works sometimes and doesn't work other times. And it's a real shame because I think they'd created the town square for better or for worse. Jack, who was the guy that founded it?
Jack Dorsey.
Jack Dorsey, who was a pretty rubbish CEO, but he built something pretty amazing. And now we're seeing that go backwards, which I think is a real shame. But again, as I said, Blue Sky's pretty cool, and who knows, at least there's some competition in that space.
Yeah.
But I reckon I could take a company like X and run it into the ground far better than Elon Musk.
Couple of other things we wanted to chat through. Microsoft, one of their maneuvers has left them with a $29 billion tax bill, US dollars. So, in New Zealand terms, that'll be close to $50 billion. So, off the back of the largest audit in US history, the Inland Revenue Service, they rejected Microsoft's attempts to channel profits via a small factory in Puerto Rico that was putting Windows onto media, onto I guess CDs, DVDs, and so on. And when we were chatting before we started, you were walking through from your time with with Microsoft and your visibility on other large multinational organisations. They would usually have mechanisms that were that were set up to legally make sure that they weren't paying too much tax in one direction or another.
Correct.
But in this case, it looks as though whatever Microsoft were doing here has certainly upset the IRS, and they feel as though Microsoft has crossed a line. And I find these sorts of things fascinating because we look at individuals that they may be doing something that is questionable, and in fact it's Kim.com came up in a conversation with someone in the last few days, and because of some of the content he'd been commenting on online, his name came up, and very, very smart individual, and from as far as he was concerned, he probably would have felt like Microsoft have felt like what he was doing business-wise was entirely legitimate. Yeah. But it was, I'm sure he knew it was close to the wire, and there were lawyers involved and so on. And there's an element where these big multinationals actually do, something somewhat similar, and they're looking to maximise their opportunities, and sometimes they get it wrong, whether it's their lawyers advise them wrongly or they misinterpret it. I don't know how these things come about exactly. It's obviously here we're talking about on an insane sort of scale for most New Zealanders to get their head around, but they had sold their intellectual property to this 85-person factory that they owned in a small Puerto Rican city after having a favourable tax deal with Puerto Rico, and then channeled their profits through that facility that was basically making the Windows and Office media at that time. And it says some of the Microsoft execs at the time celebrated this pure tax play, and it was they felt that it was Very good, but this sort of aligns with discussions we've had over the years around, how do you ensure especially multinational entities are taxed appropriately, and it's very hard to get these things right because you can just move things around and make changes. But in this case, they've got caught out, and
it's all about it's all about size of the beast, right? If you do the thing in reverse, think about Kim.com. Very brave move by Kim.com and the Meta folks to give the finger to the largest media organizations in the world. If you think about the likes of Disney as a law firm that runs theme parks, I think that's a Scott Galloway quote. That is exactly right. These, the reason these people are in business, their business is media, intellectual property, and they will protect that with their lives, right? And so to run a site where allegedly those files were being shared was a very brave move. That was probably never going to end well, and guess what? It didn't. And at some point, he'll probably be wearing an orange jumpsuit, right? Then you think about the Microsoft thing, and my understanding of this, and I saw this pretty close up when I worked for Microsoft NZ, it's actually quite a simple mechanism. Basically what they do is they separate the value, the intellectual property part of the product from the physical product. So there'll be a manufacturing the CD, costs $1. There'll be a certificate of authenticity or some documentation, something goes with it. Now it's $2. And whenever that gets, let's say, installed on a new PC, the PC manufacturer will pay this company in Puerto Rico, I don't know, $70 or $80 or whatever for a Windows license. Let's say it's a Windows license, and the local subsidiary, let's say it's the United States, where it was that machine had that installed on it. The local Microsoft subsidiary will book $2 worth of revenue for the CD, or $2.50 if they mark it up or whatever it is. But the $70 or $80 US gets attributed to this company in Puerto Rico, which at the time was all perfectly legitimate, and again, one of the things I'd really stress, having seen this fairly close up, Microsoft's legal stuff, whilst you might not agree with it, they went to the ends of the earth to ensure they adhered to local law, and that's hard when you're operating multinationally out of a US headquartered company, and Sarbanes-Oxley applies even if you're in the branch office in Afghanistan or something. It's very, very tricky, but they were so such sticklers for adhering to the law. I think what's happened here is that the IRS have gone from viewing this as a tax avoidance mechanism, because avoidance is legal, it's evasion that's illegal, to seeing it as an egregious one finger salute to the IRS, right? And I think someone somewhere's got very angry about that and rethought the whole thing, right? Because I think the premise of this is that it was from the get-go designed to avoid paying tax. So I'm sure they'll reach some sort of settlement. I'll eat my hat if Microsoft winds up paying $29 billion. I'll eat my hat if they wind up paying nothing. So somewhere in the middle of there is what they're going to wind up paying. But I think you're going to see more of this stuff in a world where, every country around the planet's, needs to spend more on education, infrastructure, healthcare, and all those other things. Where's that money going to come from? Taxation. The large corporations getting away with shuffling dollars all around the place to make them hard for governments to get their hands on for tax. I have a sense that that's probably coming to an end, right? It won't happen overnight, but I think it will happen. Right. And
there'll be a role here for shrinking the base of lawyers, I would imagine, within some of these firms as AI kind of comes into play. But who knows? Yeah.
Interesting situation.
Could go the other way.
Yeah, and I think that this will get blasted, shouted from the rooftops, because I think it's sending a very clear signal, right? This is you don't want to be the first, but they won't be the last.
Now, also on the legal front, we've heard about Google offering a level of copyright indemnity to those that are using their generative artificial intelligence services, and we're in I guess a very interesting time where some of the legal considerations aren't very clear. They will vary from country to country, and AI is often often might be the wrong word. Generally speaking, when we're looking at generative AI, it's drawing on everybody else's
correct.
intellectual property, right? So, maybe they're building in some specific capabilities so that they don't overstep the mark. That said, I've seen a friend over the last probably 9 to 12 months who writes for a big tech outlet in the US. On multiple occasions, sort of sharing content that he's used, say Google AI or another AI tool to ask and answer, and it's basically pulled through content from him or his publication, and then shown it off as though Google have produced it themselves and so on. So in some ways, it's kind of ironic that you've got Google here going, "Oh no, we'll take care of the legal side if anyone comes after you." Yet I'm not sure if Google have actually got their own house in order.
So let me explain to you what's happening
here. When it comes to generative AI.
Let me explain to you what's happening here, right? So every company on the planet has figured out that there are a lot of legal fishhooks in this, right? Those large language models are someone else's data. Right? And so at some point that's going to be a challenge. The thing that the Googles and Microsofts will do the same. Adobe's already done it with their products. What they're offering is indemnity, right? And the way they do that is they have bigger law firms than the law firms, and they have more money than anybody on the planet, right? So you're speaking about your friend, right? They can absolutely go and sue Google. That would be fascinating, watching that from the sidelines. It would take years. It would cost them millions. They can't afford to do it, so they won't, right? So it's basically the David versus Goliath thing, right? And the tech companies are the Goliaths, and it doesn't take people too long to work out that they're the Davids, and so they just won't do it. Having said that, Adobe was shouting from the rooftops just in the last few months that they hadn't used anyone's imagery other than their own to train their generative AI art stuff. And I saw someone on Twitter X the other day talking about the fact that they'd found some of their own images, like literally in there. So I don't know whether that's a lie or someone slipped up somewhere. So this is going to go on for quite a while, right? I'll tell you a really interesting conversation on the Pivot podcast last week or the week before, Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway, where Scott had the idea of the media companies should get together. I think I've got this right. Should get together, join forces, and go to one of the companies, Microsoft or Google or whoever it is, and go, we will license our stuff to you, right? It will be worth billions, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars over time. But our stuff is your stuff. Everyone else will join forces and will go after them, right? So it becomes a war of attrition, effectively. Whereas, and let's say it's a Microsoft that goes, oh, yeah, we'll sign up for that. All of a sudden, they can take all of the other tools or the vendors of the other tools to court, right? Because the data is theirs. And I would not, it's an arms race. And I would not be surprised to see something along those lines, because it's a way of monetizing something that's being effectively taken or borrowed. Stolen would be a hard word. I wouldn't want to use that, even though it is. The opportunity is huge. It's not difficult, and it really all it needs is the first tech vendor to blink, right? And then all the others are on notice. So I think that'll come. I'd be very surprised. You imagine Disney, all of those folks, content creators. It'll be huge.
And talking of these big firms, Microsoft have finally managed to pull off their takeover of Activision Blizzard, over $100 billion. If you were to put that in
their biggest
New Zealand
acquisition,
currency.
I think, isn't it? I think it's the biggest acquisition they've ever done. Even bigger than Nokia. We won't talk about Nokia. But what an incredible, that's tenacity, right? That's been dragging out for a couple of years. Long time. Long time.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what's going on behind the scenes of something like that. But $69 billion, that's a very big deal.
Now, something we were going to talk about previous week, but we ran out of time. This move towards digital passports. And so we've got the Singapore, who have announced that they are going. I think passport free is probably the wrong terminology, although that was one of the headlines used that that term, because realistically, if you're traveling from Singapore to somewhere else, you're going to need your passport to get into that other country. Certainly in the
Passport
shorter term.
optional, maybe that's the...
So we are moving into really a new phase as we see this start to happen. In more than just one country, and I'm very curious to see how it plays out. I think Finnish border guard, they've been trialing what they call digital traveller credentials at Helsinki airport, and there's been some form of digital passport option in the US. I remember from sort of seeing signage there, but I haven't.
Oh yeah, that's
haven't
the
delved
queue,
into that
for
quite a while in terms of actually how far that goes and.
Yep.
And what that does. Of course, we've had e-visas and varying other kind of mechanisms, the sort of digital information on our passports. So if you had an appropriate sort of passport going into the US, that would sort of speed things along. Yep. But we definitely have some changing times ahead in these regards. I'm very curious how quickly these things move, and then what does the picture look like? Do we get to a point where you only have the option of a digital passport in a few years? I mean, here in New Zealand, we don't have, say, digital driver's licenses or digital passports at all. But these are moves that have definitely been afoot in varying places, and I think there are always good reasons to go digital, but there are often some counters and some downsides to doing it. Some of that is sort of digital divide stuff, and people that aren't so au fait with technology or not so keen on technology, and then there's probably some elements there on privacy and so on. And the more you kind of digitize these things and start collecting big databases of information, there can be some downsides to that. On the flip side, it does often seem odd that that we hear these different stories around whether it's criminals or what have you, and people that have been doing certain things, and it seems like the police, the different government entities have no idea whether the person's in New Zealand or outside of New Zealand, because they don't. It's like you kind of think you would know something basic like that, whether someone's got across the border in one direction or another. And not that these things necessarily need you to be holding digital passports, but there is this obviously general digitization trajectory that we're on.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. The article that you've linked to is interesting because it talks about what Singapore is doing, and then at the end of the article talks about what they've done in Dubai, which doesn't sound any different than what we've done here. And you got to hand it to Morris Williamson, bless his cotton socks. He was the guy that introduced the kiosks here. God knows how long, a long time ago, and we've kind of just gotten used to that. And we still go into countries where that stuff's super new, modern technology. I mean, it sounds like the Singaporean stuff's based on biometrics. And they talk all the wonderful talk about how there'll be systems and audits and checks and balances and data will be deleted and all that sort of thing, and that's great until it's not.
Good luck with that.
That's right. And it'll either be I don't know, something you get leaked, hacked, or stolen, or some nefarious character somewhere will work out a way around it. I don't know, but I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it that's been running for 10 years without some sort of major spectacular security, national security issue or something like that.
Well, we've got used to sort of biometrics in the US for better or for worse. It's that's part of the mechanism. Although that is a little bit of a joke when you go over one thing, you got biometrics, and then you got another border you can kind of you can get in kind of any time you want.
It's all theatre.
It's kind of like
security theatre.
I don't know how that country works at all, regardless of who the
I've never felt less welcome.
who the
than I
president
do.
is there. It's
That's
kind
right.
of just like,
At Lax Airport.
what a mess.
I love that whole thing about having to explain your life story around how you'd like to come there for 5 days to attend a conference. It'd be interesting. I can it's cool. I get why they're doing it. Makes sense. But I think some of the practicalities might get interesting quickly. Who knows?
Before we wrap up, if you've got a quick minute, just keen to hear about your views of SaaStr, which was the big annual software as a service event, the big event in the world that that takes place each year. You've just been to that, was it early last month, early September?
Early September, first week of September.
In San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, let me have a rave. Cool. Yeah. So SaaStr is awesome. It's the second year in a row that I've went. Very fortunate to go and represent the Kiwi SaaS team. We had about 30, 40 Kiwis there. A bunch of them flew out of New Zealand, and there was a number from Toronto and Austin and San Francisco that turned up as well. It's a fantastic event. It's the worldwide event for the SaaS sector. I think there's 10 to 12,000 people came along for it. It's held in a place called San Mateo, which is just outside of San Francisco.
Close to the airport, isn't it?
Yeah, quite close to the airport. The venue's great. It's kind of like, if you'd imagine, the Epsom Showgrounds in Auckland with large marquees and some indoor space as well, lots of different stages. The biggest challenge is working out what to go and what presentation to go and listen to, because while you're sitting in one, there's 2 others that you would have loved to have been at as well. And the thing that I came back and annoyed all of my Kiwi SaaS colleagues, because I just went on and on and on about it, was just the impact that AI is going to have in the SaaS sector for everything from coming up with the idea for a business. In fact, there was a great presentation I went to that was run by one of the VPs from AWS, and he came up with this made-up idea of starting a veterinary practice for zoos. And so he used artificial intelligence to build his product backlog, what are the features that would be required, to research the regulatory environment around that in the States, because if you hold enough sedative for an elephant, you need to have special premises and facilities for doing so, for example. So he built the product, the key features, the regulatory stuff. He used a couple of AI tools to build websites. He used an AI tool to do some of the coding for him. And so all of that was, and this is literally a 45-minute presentation. It's like, wow, it's pretty cool. And the presentation I went to not long after that was by a guy from Adobe who showed some of the stuff that they're doing with, Photoshop and Firefly and some of their tools, and how they're democratizing the creation of imagery, and allowing plebs like me to provide some prompts to get some absolutely incredible, artwork, whatever it might be, ad campaigns or websites or product or whatever. And then making massive changes to that, colorways and all sorts of other things instantaneously, effectively. So putting tools in my hand to do things that I would always have had to use a far more talented human for. So just, and then there was the conversations around companies using AI for marketing. So there's a company that were talking about how they send out, I think, 1 million emails a month generated by AI. Very personalised based on how you're using their product, which parts of their product that you're using. And they showed a email message that someone had sent them saying, your AI automated emails are creepy, but they're the best creepy emails I get. And in fact, this company has found their outbound marketing, AI-driven marketing, so successful that they're going to downsize their outbound sales team and increase the amount of stuff they're doing around AI. It's more effective, more cost efficient than using humans to do it. So it just, what I walked away from thinking, all the kind of things going off in my head was the SaaS space has always moved quickly, and has always been incredibly innovative. And I think that's about to go through an absolute step change. I think the number of companies, ideas being turned into SaaS companies, and the speed at which they do that, and the speed at which they can go to market, because so many things, not all things, and a lot of it's about enhancing humans. It's not just about tech doing it all. But I can absolutely see we're heading into a future where, you could have a couple of wines on a Friday, build something over the weekend, launch it on a Monday, and, have 10,000 users by the Friday. that's the world we're heading into. So it was awe-inspiring. If you're a SaaS company in New Zealand and you truly aspire to going global and doing it properly, you have to go to SaaSta. It's a great event.
Good advice. Thank you, Brett. That's
Rant over.
Fantastic. And look, I found it quite fascinating when you drill into particular areas, how many companies are executing very fast with delivering AI capabilities.
Absolutely.
And in some cases, they can be pretty weak, but there are some companies that are doing an exceptional job of really integrating it into existing offerings, or launching new offerings that are absolutely outstanding.
There was a great example of that. There was a guy that got up and spoke, and he works for a law tech company. Or he founded a law tech company. They just exited for $685 million. They had built AI into their product. They're using ChatGPT a year ago, so not 10 years ago. A year and a day ago, their product didn't have AI in it. So they're very early on in it. And he was talking about when they were out. He goes and talks. I think he was saying 5 customers a week. Every single week, he's talking to 5 customers. And what they found was some of these more old school traditional law firms, when they were talking to the partners, really weren't that interested. And so what they did was they went and talked to some of the, first, second year lawyers just out of university in these firms who were using their tools to the nth degree and being so incredibly productive. And when they went to the older folks and went, you have a look at this, bam, made a sale every time, right? So it was interesting. I'm sure their $685 million exit was very influenced by the AI piece, but the AI piece was helping them sell their tools to an audience. I mean, the people that signed the check weren't the first-year lawyers, to folks who could see the benefit clearly to their business from a productivity and competitiveness perspective. Yeah.
And it would open a whole can of worms if we were to delve into how it impacts business models, but that's a whole other part of the picture.
Next week.
We'll save that for another time. Thank you, Brett. Really, really good to catch up.
It's always good.
And some fascinating insights as always. Of course, a big thank you to our show partners, to Gorilla Technology, HP, Spark, 2 Degrees, and 1NZ. We'll look forward to catching everyone again next week. And of course, if you've been listening to the audio podcast, make sure you are following us on those video platforms. We're across YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, X, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn. If you want to get the live streams, then just follow myself, Paul Spain, on LinkedIn. But been great having you, Brett, and we'll look forward to catching everyone again next week. All right,
thanks, man.
See ya.
Thank you.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.